You already sensed that something felt genuinely off between you two. You felt it before you could even properly name what was happening. That quiet shift, that strange emerging distance, like someone slowly dimming the lights in a room you used to feel so genuinely warm within. And now you're sitting here wondering if you're genuinely going crazy, wondering if you're reading far too much into things, wondering if maybe he genuinely just needs some space right now. Maybe he's genuinely going through something difficult. Maybe if you just wait a little bit longer, he'll come back to the version of himself that once made you feel genuinely chosen. But here's what genuinely nobody ever tells you. With an avoidant person specifically, the exit genuinely doesn't look like a door slamming shut dramatically. It looks instead like a window slowly fogging up gradually, until one day you press your hand against the glass and realize you genuinely cannot see through it clearly anymore. And you don't even genuinely know exactly when that particular thing happened. So before you convince yourself that everything is genuinely fine, before you write another text message you'll genuinely regret sending, before you give one more piece of yourself away to someone who might have already quietly decided he's genuinely done with the relationship, you need to hear this important information, because these three particular signs genuinely don't lie to you. And once you learn how to properly read them clearly, you'll genuinely never be able to unsee them again afterward. Let's start with something you genuinely need to understand first. Avoidant attachment genuinely doesn't look the way most people typically expect it to look like. It's genuinely not always cold, cruel, and obviously apparent. It's genuinely not always the guy who never shows up or never bothers calling you. Sometimes it's actually the guy who showed up genuinely beautifully at the very beginning, who made you feel like you had finally found someone genuinely safe, who seemed so genuinely present and so emotionally available that you genuinely thought, finally, this particular one is genuinely different from the rest, and then something genuinely changed between you. The particular shift was genuinely subtle at first, so subtle that you almost genuinely missed it entirely. Maybe the text messages got a little bit shorter than before. Maybe he genuinely stopped initiating conversations as much as he used to. Maybe the conversations that used to genuinely go on for hours started wrapping up in just 20 minutes instead. And you genuinely told yourself it was simply because he was busy or stressed or genuinely going through something difficult, and you made yourself smaller to give him considerably more room to breathe. You asked for genuinely less from him. You needed genuinely less from him. You showed up with genuinely less energy so he genuinely wouldn't feel overwhelmed by you. Because that's genuinely what you do when you love someone who consistently pulls away from you. You bend yourself in half trying desperately not to be the actual reason they eventually leave. But here's the honest truth that's genuinely going to sting just a little bit. That particular bending genuinely never actually works in the end. And the reason it genuinely never works goes all the way down to the fundamental root of exactly how an avoidant person is genuinely wired internally. This particular person genuinely learned, usually quite early in their life, that genuine closeness was inherently dangerous. That genuinely needing other people consistently led to disappointment eventually. That authentic vulnerability represented a genuine threat, not a genuine gift at all. So they genuinely built protective walls around themselves, not necessarily because they genuinely wanted to hurt you specifically, but because somewhere deep within their nervous system, letting someone in completely felt remarkably like standing right on the edge of a steep cliff. And for a while, you genuinely were the exception to that particular rule. Or at least it genuinely felt that way to you at the time. In the early stages of a relationship with an avoidant person specifically, something called the fantasy phase genuinely happens. They can actually genuinely feel close to you during this period because the relationship remains still genuinely new enough that the protective walls haven't fully come back up yet. There's genuinely enough uncertainty and excitement present that their entire system stays somewhat genuinely open during this time. But the moment the relationship genuinely starts feeling real to them, the moment real intimacy genuinely starts developing between you, the moment you genuinely start to matter significantly to them, That's precisely when the internal alarm bells go off inside them and they genuinely start pulling back from you. So everything you genuinely experienced at the very beginning, all that warmth and presence and genuine attentiveness that genuinely wasn't exactly a lie on their part, but it genuinely also wasn't sustainable for them long term, because their entire nervous system remains wired to equate genuine closeness with a fundamental loss of self. And so they genuinely manage that particular terror by deliberately creating distance instead. The genuine question becomes whether that particular distance is something they're genuinely willing to work through together with you, or whether they've quietly decided internally that the required work is genuinely too much for them to handle. And that's genuinely what we're here to figure out together today. Because there genuinely exists a real difference between an avoidant person who is genuinely struggling with intimacy but still genuinely wants you present in his life, and an avoidant person who has genuinely emotionally exited the relationship already but simply hasn't told you yet directly. That particular second category is genuinely the one you need to know about, because the signs of that second category are genuinely not loud at all. They genuinely don't announce themselves clearly. They slip in quite quietly instead, and they look on the surface almost genuinely identical to regular avoidant behavior patterns. So you genuinely keep waiting patiently. You genuinely keep hoping desperately. You genuinely keep doing the emotional work of two people combined. And meanwhile, he's genuinely already somewhere else entirely in his own head. He simply hasn't gotten around to making it genuinely official between you yet. These three particular signs represent exactly what separates temporary avoidant withdrawal from permanent emotional departure entirely. And once you genuinely understand them, really understand them deeply, not just intellectually on the surface, but genuinely in your gut, instinctively, you'll finally genuinely be able to stop second-guessing yourself constantly. So let's genuinely get into this important discussion. The first particular sign is what I personally call the disappearance of repair. Every genuine relationship experiences ruptures occasionally. That's genuinely not a sign of some kind of broken relationship at all. That's actually a sign of a genuinely real one instead. Two human beings in close proximity are naturally going to bump into each other emotionally sometimes. They're going to genuinely misunderstand each other occasionally. They're going to say the genuinely wrong things sometimes by accident. They're going to experience moments of genuine disconnect, tension, and conflict together. That's simply reality for any relationship. What genuinely separates a healthy relationship from an unhealthy one isn't whether those particular ruptures happen at all. It's genuinely whether both people involved are willing to actually do something about them afterward. Whether both people are genuinely willing to come back to each other after the initial bump, specifically to repair things, to reconnect meaningfully, to say, hey, I genuinely think something went sideways between us just now. Can we genuinely talk about it together? Now, here's exactly where avoidance becomes genuinely tricky to read. Even during a genuinely healthy stage of a relationship with an avoidant person, repair genuinely looks quite different than you might expect. An avoidant person genuinely doesn't always rush toward that particular conversation immediately. They might genuinely need some time first. They might genuinely pull away slightly at first before eventually coming back around. They might genuinely express repair through concrete action rather than through spoken words specifically, through simply showing up again, through doing something genuinely kind for you, through breaking the underlying tension with humor, or sending a text message that genuinely opens a door back toward connection. The repair might genuinely not look like what you're personally used to experiencing, but it's genuinely still there present. You can genuinely feel it clearly when an avoidant person genuinely still wants the relationship to continue, even if they genuinely cannot say it in the exact way you personally need them to say it. Something within them genuinely moves back towards you regardless. Something within them genuinely keeps that particular thread alive between you. But when an avoidant person genuinely no longer wants you present in his life anymore, that particular movement genuinely stops completely. The repair genuinely disappears entirely, and this is genuinely quite different from him simply being bad at handling conflict in general. Pay close attention to that important distinction, because it genuinely matters enormously here. Someone who's simply bad at handling conflict still genuinely shows some kind of signal, some flicker of genuinely wanting to close the existing gap between you. They might send you a random meme to genuinely lighten the overall mood. They might ask you a question about your day as though nothing genuinely happened between you. They might genuinely reach out to you first for once, even if they genuinely cannot properly name exactly what they're reaching for. These represent imperfect but genuinely real attempts at repair. When an avoidant person has genuinely decided he no longer wants you present in his life, those particular attempts genuinely stop completely. After conflict or tension occurs, there is simply genuine silence instead. Not the temporary silence of someone who genuinely needs to regulate their emotions and then comes back around afterward, but a silence that genuinely extends indefinitely instead. A silence that genuinely becomes the new normal between you. A silence where you are genuinely always the one who breaks it eventually. A silence where if you genuinely don't reach out first, entire days genuinely go by and he genuinely makes no move whatsoever to close that particular gap between you. And then when you genuinely do reach out to him, maybe you genuinely get some kind of response back. Maybe you genuinely don't get anything at all, but there's genuinely no acknowledgement of the underlying rupture that occurred. There's genuinely no attempt whatsoever to repair it properly. It's genuinely like it never even happened at all. Or worse yet, it's genuinely like you don't matter enough to him for him to put in the necessary energy required to fix it properly. Think carefully about the last few times you genuinely experienced conflict or tension with him specifically. Who genuinely came back first afterward? Who genuinely made the first move to reconnect with the other? Who genuinely said something, even something quite small, to try bridging that particular gap between you? If every single time the honest answer is genuinely you genuinely need to sit with that reality for a moment. Because in the earlier days of your relationship, he genuinely probably did that sometimes himself. He genuinely probably made that first move occasionally, even if it was somewhat awkward, even if it was genuinely imperfect. Something within him genuinely moved back towards you during those times. And now it genuinely doesn't happen anymore. And you've genuinely been so busy being the one who consistently shows up that you genuinely haven't had time to properly notice that you've simply become the only one showing up anymore. The genuine absence of repair isn't simply about who texts first between you two. It's genuinely about who still cares enough to genuinely want things to be okay between you both. And when an avoidant person has genuinely emotionally left the relationship, the answer to that particular question genuinely stops being him entirely. Now, let's discuss the second particular sign. And this one proves genuinely sneaky because it can actually look like genuine personal growth on the surface. It can genuinely look like him finally having his own life, finally doing things for himself, finally becoming a genuinely full person outside the relationship. And if you're genuinely not careful about this, you'll actually end up celebrating it. You'll genuinely think, oh good, he's genuinely not so dependent on me being his only source of connection anymore. This represents genuinely healthy behavior, but there genuinely exists a version of this particular pattern that isn't healthy at all. The second particular sign is what I call strategic replacement. Here's exactly what this genuinely means. When an avoidant person is genuinely done with a relationship emotionally, he genuinely doesn't usually sit within the resulting wreckage for long. That would genuinely require far too much emotional processing on his part, far too much sitting with genuinely uncomfortable feelings, far too much of the very vulnerability he's spent his entire life actively avoiding. Instead, he genuinely fills the resulting space instead. He genuinely starts building an entirely new life that genuinely doesn't include you in any meaningful way whatsoever. and he genuinely does this with a kind of energy and enthusiasm that feels almost genuinely cruel, given exactly how things have genuinely been between you two lately. The passage explains a key idea. When an avoidant person has emotionally moved on, their behavior often changes from distance with inner conflict to distance with relief. They may appear happier, more active, more socially engaged, and focused on a life that no longer includes you. The painful part is seeing them seem completely fine while you are still trying to understand what happened. A major sign is a consistent shift of energy away from the relationship. New hobbies, new routines, new friendships, and a lack of effort to include you may show that their emotional investment has been redirected elsewhere. What matters is not one good week or needing alone time, but a repeated pattern over time. Another important sign is emotional absence when you are together. They may physically be present but seem disconnected, uninterested, or like they are simply going through the motions. You may feel like you are trying to reconnect with the person they used to be, but their emotional presence is no longer there. The third sign discussed is the loss of curiosity. In the beginning, genuine interest shows through questions, attention, and wanting to understand your inner world. When someone is still emotionally invested, they usually remain curious about your thoughts, dreams, fears, and experiences. When that curiosity disappears completely, it can signal emotional withdrawal. Small actions often reveal the truth. Remembering details, asking follow-up questions, checking in about things you shared, and wanting to understand, you show ongoing emotional involvement. Without that curiosity, the relationship can start feeling like two people existing beside each other rather than truly connecting. The core message: look at consistent actions, not only words. Emotional investment is shown through presence, curiosity, effort, and inclusion. Conversations become genuinely transactional instead. They're genuinely about logistics only, about what's genuinely happening this particular week, about surface level things only. He genuinely stops asking questions that go below the surface waterline, and not in a way that feels like he's genuinely respecting your personal boundaries or giving you appropriate space, but in a way that feels like he's genuinely no longer particularly interested in hearing the answers at all. And there's a very specific kind of loneliness that genuinely comes along with this particular pattern, because you're genuinely with this person physically, but you feel completely genuinely invisible to them. You could genuinely say almost anything at all, and it would genuinely barely register with them at all. You could genuinely be going through something really difficult, and the response would be so genuinely surface level, so emotionally thin, that you genuinely end up feeling more alone than if he genuinely said nothing at all to you, because nothing he genuinely says actually makes genuine contact with the actual real you underneath. He's genuinely responding instead to some version of you that he's genuinely no longer actually paying close attention to anymore. That particular invisibility represents one of the most genuinely psychologically damaging things you can possibly experience within a relationship, because you genuinely start to question yourself constantly. You genuinely start to wonder if you've somehow become less interesting to him, if you've genuinely lost something valuable somewhere along the way, if you're genuinely not enough for him. And you try even harder to genuinely capture his attention back. You say genuinely more interesting things to him. You plan genuinely more interesting experiences together. You try to manufacture moments of genuine connection artificially, because the natural ones have genuinely dried up entirely between you. But the underlying problem was genuinely never you being uninteresting at all. The genuine problem is that he has genuinely stopped being interested in you entirely. And the death of curiosity happens genuinely, quietly and slowly over time. And it genuinely happens without any real announcement whatsoever. But once you genuinely see it clearly, really clearly, you genuinely cannot pretend it isn't there anymore. So let's bring all three of these particular signs together now. The disappearance of repair, the pattern where every single attempt to close the existing gap comes genuinely from you and none whatsoever from him, where the resulting space after conflict just genuinely stays open indefinitely and he genuinely makes no move whatsoever to fix it himself. Strategic replacement, the way his energy is genuinely visibly going somewhere else entirely now. New things, new people, an entirely new version of his life that genuinely doesn't have a real space for you within it anymore. And when you are genuinely together, a presence that feels genuinely hollow, like he's already somewhere else entirely within his own mind. The death of curiosity, the way conversations have genuinely gone thin and transactional between you. The way he genuinely no longer asks you real questions anymore. The way you could genuinely say almost anything at all, and it would genuinely barely leave any mark whatsoever. The way you genuinely feel invisible, even when you're sitting genuinely right next to him physically. If you are genuinely seeing all three of these particular things, not occasionally, not simply once in a while, but genuinely consistently as an established pattern, as the new genuine normal between you both, then you are genuinely not dealing with an avoidant person who is simply temporarily overwhelmed or genuinely going through something difficult or simply genuinely needing some space right now. You are genuinely dealing instead with someone who has genuinely emotionally exited the relationship entirely already. And I genuinely need you to understand exactly what that particular thing means for you personally, because this represents exactly where a lot of people genuinely make a critical mistake. When something you genuinely love is moving away from you, the natural instinct is to genuinely reach for it, to hold on even tighter, to genuinely refuse to let it go without putting up a genuine fight first. But here's what genuinely actually happens when you do that specific thing. With an avoidant person who has already genuinely decided he's completely done, you actually genuinely accelerate his withdrawal even further, because an avoidant person's deepest underlying fear is genuine engulfment, is genuinely feeling trapped, is genuinely feeling like they have no way out whatsoever. And when they genuinely sense that someone is holding on even tighter as they're genuinely trying to move away, their entire system genuinely doesn't soften in response. It genuinely doesn't respond to your love by genuinely coming back towards you. Instead, it genuinely escalates further. The protective walls go even higher. The distance becomes genuinely greater. The coldness genuinely intensifies further. And you end up trapped within a cycle where the harder you genuinely try, the further away he genuinely gets from you. And then you get to genuinely carry the resulting story that you genuinely weren't enough somehow, that you genuinely tried so hard and it still genuinely wasn't enough, that love itself genuinely wasn't enough somehow. But that's genuinely not the true underlying story here. The true story is that you were genuinely trying to fill a hole with something that was genuinely never designed to fill it in the first place. You were genuinely trying to reach someone who had already genuinely left in every way that genuinely mattered. And you were genuinely doing all of this with a love that genuinely deserved to be given, instead to someone who would actually genuinely receive it properly. So what exactly do you genuinely do with all of this information now? First, you genuinely stop making yourself smaller than you actually are. One of the most genuinely corrosive things about being with an avoidant person who is genuinely pulling away is exactly what it does to your nervous system over time. You genuinely start to anticipate his moods constantly. You genuinely start to calibrate your own behavior based on what might genuinely trigger more distance from him. You genuinely stop bringing up things that genuinely matter to you because you genuinely don't want to be perceived as a burden to him. You genuinely stop asking for what you actually need because you genuinely don't want to push him even further away. You basically genuinely shrink your entire emotional life down to a size that you genuinely think will be tolerable to him. And in doing so, you genuinely lose yourself completely in the process. The relationship genuinely stops stops being about two people together. It genuinely becomes about one person constantly managing the entire emotional ecosystem, so the other person genuinely stays comfortable throughout. And that genuinely isn't love at all. That represents genuine survival instead. You genuinely deserve considerably more than mere survival. Second, you genuinely stop negotiating with the silence itself. One of the things that genuinely happens when someone is genuinely pulling away from you is that we genuinely start to read meaning into small, insignificant things. A slightly warmer text message than usual, a moment where he genuinely seemed more present than usual, a shared laugh that genuinely felt like the old days between you. And we take those particular tiny moments and we genuinely inflate them into evidence that things are genuinely getting better, that he's genuinely coming back around, that it was genuinely just a temporary phase after all. And then when the withdrawal genuinely continues afterward, we're genuinely devastated all over again because we genuinely built so much emotional hope on something so genuinely small. This genuinely isn't your fault at all. This represents your nervous system genuinely trying to manage uncertainty the best way it knows how. This represents hope genuinely doing exactly what hope naturally does, but when those particular small moments are genuinely consistently not followed by any real, lasting change, when the overall pattern genuinely always returns to distance and absence and invisibility, you genuinely have to stop negotiating with the silence itself. You genuinely have to stop making a case for something that genuinely isn't arguing back to you at all. Third, and this represents genuinely the hardest one to accept, you genuinely have to be willing to see clearly, even when seeing clearly proves genuinely painful for you. Because clarity, even genuinely painful clarity, represents a genuine gift in itself. When you can genuinely see exactly what's actually happening without the filter of what you genuinely wish was happening instead, you genuinely get your own life back. You genuinely get your own energy back. You genuinely get to stop spending your precious emotional resources on someone who has quietly decided that those particular resources aren't something he genuinely wants anymore. And that particular grief is genuinely real. The grief of a relationship that you genuinely wanted to be different than it actually was. The grief of a person you genuinely thought you had, who maybe you genuinely never fully had in the first place. That particular grief is genuinely legitimate and it genuinely deserves to be properly felt. But feeling it genuinely isn't the same thing as staying permanently trapped within it. You can genuinely grieve and still genuinely choose yourself simultaneously. You can genuinely have compassion for exactly why someone is the way they genuinely are and still genuinely hold a firm boundary that says, I will genuinely not keep giving myself to a situation that is slowly erasing me as a person. You genuinely cannot do that necessary work for them. You genuinely cannot love them into transformation through sheer willpower alone. He is genuinely in a place instead where he has quietly decided that it's genuinely easier to let this relationship fade away than to do what it would genuinely take to actually keep it alive. And you genuinely have a choice to make here. You can genuinely stay and keep hoping that something eventually shifts between you. That represents a genuinely valid choice if you genuinely make it consciously, if you genuinely make it with your eyes fully open. The passage's core message: stop chasing clarity from someone who has emotionally withdrawn. Recognize the signs, redirect your energy toward healing yourself, and choose relationships where love is mutual, consistent, and intentionally chosen rather than staying trapped in fear and uncertainty.